This is a list of the currently most powerful meta builds used in Guild Wars 2 PvP based on tournament play. You don't need to play these builds to perform well or to have fun, but it's just what people are playing right now in competitive matches. So it can be good to know what to play if you want to fill a specific role, or what to expect so you can play around them. To see all the traits and gear associated with each build, you can find the build and guides for each on guildgen.com, linked in the description. If you don't understand any of the terminology used here, try to check out some of the PvP beginner guides, also linked there. Let's start out by looking at the best duelists. The most powerful at the moment is the Bunker Condition Untamed Ranger. This build is not only extremely survivable, but it has plenty of mobility due to using the staff, and the ambush of the dagger can port as well, which allows you to control the map, defend nodes that thieves are trying to decap, and contest objectives without much risk to your positioning. Also, this build has the highest amount of projectile block possible due to the Unleashed Pet's Poison Cloud, the Siege Turtle Pet's Beast ability, and the Staff's Wall, which helps you to survive against some of the other meta classes that use projectiles, like Bladesworns, Deadeyes, and Scrappers. And on top of this, you have a pet and some decent damage with the Untamed Ambush skills, which means you can still pressure 1v1s or even get counter kills on very squishy classes. But this build is pretty boring to play if you're not looking for the very best. Bladesworn warriors are very strong as well because of their similar projectile blocking capabilities with Aegis generation and the shield trait in defense. But although it has nice stuns and good damage over time, it's a bit clunky and slow, which makes it an easier focus target when it gets focused by multiple players. A Spellbreaker is also not a bad choice here, since it has full counter for surviving and counter pressure, but it won't have the same sustain as a Bladesworn since the nerf to full counter, which prevents you from benefiting from adrenal health if it doesn't hit anything. Also, a Hammer Spellbreaker might be the only thing with enough CC to lock down the Untamed build long enough to actually kill it. Hammer Catalysts are still great. Unlike Bladesworns, who are limited by ammo and they can run out of damage, Hammer Catalysts never run out of damage, so they're the most aggressive duelist. But for the role that they play, it's not ideal because all the damage that they deal is not worth anything if you can't secure kills when enemies disengage from you, and Hammer Catalyst has almost no chasing tools to help it with rotations and counterplay. For supports, the Core Guardian is seeing the most play because stability is just too good of a utility, especially in the current meta where things are so very burst oriented. Getting CC'd can mean your death instantly, and no other support has the same access to it. However, this can be a bit simplistic for some, and it mostly relies on your teammates to carry you. In more casual play or solo queue, a Tempest Elementalist might be more impactful because it just has so much more utility, and you don't need to deal with instant coordinated burst damage as often. But you may need to queue with a Willbender DPS in your comp to provide stability. In a future patch, Firebrands will be getting buffs, so we'll see if that replaces Core Guardian. For DPS, your best in slot is a Grenade Scrapper Engineer, and this will only become better in the future. It does so much damage in melee and at range, and the super speed it gives to its team makes it great for the movement necessary to maneuver high-risk teamfight situations. The main build being used does lack stun breaks, so it's very easy to lock down if you can't keep up with it, which is why sticking with your support that gives stability is pretty important. Vindicator Revenants are also a good DPS option, but compared to a Scrapper, their damage is much smaller in range and not as much pressure, especially because it is mainly melee, which can be counterplayed much more easily in larger fights. Still, Vindicators have great survivability built in and can even support their allies, which makes it a much better option in casual play or solo queue where you can't rely on having a support giving you stability. Necromancers are the next best pick. They're the heaviest damage option because they not only do huge damage, but they can also remove boons, which will always make them the ideal pick for countering extremely tanky builds and compositions. Tower Necromancers aren't so popular at the moment, but a Condition Harbinger and the Chill Reaper are both good options. Necromancers have always been a good option to counter engineers, so they can somewhat counter the meta Scrapper grenade build, but everything else can counter the Necromancer because they're so slow and easily focused. So they need to stick with their supports, and the meta is very fast paced, so fights may not last long enough for the Necromancer's sustain to win over a Scrapper's burst. For roamers, there are plenty of options, but most of those options are thieves. Deadeye, Spectre, and Daredevil all work depending on the composition. The best and most reliable option is a Conditioned Spectre, because they are also a great utility to their team. When paired with a hyper carry like a Scrapper or even a Sick'em Soul Beast, they can use the Scepter Pistol 3 skill to give quickness and barrier to supercharge their ally, and then rip boons and CC enemies to enable your allies even further. In smaller fights like a 2v2, a Conditioned Spectre can act as a support or a DPS, making it much better than an actual dedicated support like a Guardian or Tempest that prefers to be in larger fights. So Spectre can be really great on maps that promote splitting up or have plenty of terrain to port through like Forest of Niflhel, but it's much worse on maps like the Legacy of the Foefire where team fights usually get pretty large. But if your team needs more damage, a Deadeye will kill things much faster than any other build because it has arguably the highest mobility in the game and the highest burst tied together. This is of course at the cost of being one of the squishiest builds and having somewhat easy to counter mechanics due to Deadeyes being reliant on projectiles. Daredevils are a more reliable option since they can't get countered by terrain as easily, but they might not be able to survive getting close to all the damage that goes off in these teamfights since Scrappers are just throwing it around non-stop, which is why Deadeye's range is currently superior. Power Block Chronomancers, Willbenders, and any kind of Longbow Ranger is still good for a roamer role, but Thief is just the best for its role. That being said, a Thief relies on its team very heavily. They need their support and DPS and duelists to do their job to be able to perform well. And in the case that your team is losing, just being a decap bot might not feel very good. Using any of these other roamers can be a bit more damage or support for your team to help them win fights when you can't reliably expect them to succeed without you. But those are just the most popular builds. There's plenty of other stuff that works out, especially in casual play. And there will be a balance patch in the near future, so some of this might change, but I think for the most part it's just going to bring up some of the off-meta stuff, and even Scrapper is getting buffed, so that's only going to get better, so we'll see where that goes. But that's all for now, so if you like this content, then please like, subscribe, support me by becoming a patron, or by clicking any of the links in the description, and I will see you all next time.